Welcome, everyone. I'm Richard Herskowitz. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Ashland Independent Film Festival. And we're here with two representatives from NASA who were instrumental in the creation of Cinespace, the program that you just saw, which we'll be talking about. But first, let me have them introduce themselves, starting with you, Dan.
My name is Dan Jacobs. I'm with at Johnson Space Center. I do international relations as my career, working with the International Space Station, with the new Gateway program, and with commercial entities in Houston. But on the side, I'm also was involved in creating and continue to work with Cinespace.
Carlos.
Yes, hello, this is Carlos Fontanot. I've always worked in television, in imagery, video, digital still imagery. And for the last 30 years, I've been at the NASA Johnson Space Center here in Houston. And today, 20 years now, I've managed imagery from the International Space Station, all the video, still digital images that come down. And I have also I'm involved with NASA's archives, imagery archives, and that's a perfect fit for Cinespace, obviously.
Well, thank you both for participating in this, and I think this is the 5th time that we are showing Cinespace in the Ashland Independent Film Festival, and one of the reasons for that is that I was involved at the beginning in the founding of Cinespace with you guys. When I was the artistic director at the Houston Cinema Arts Festival. So let's just go back a little before we talk about the program that we just saw to like the origins of Cinespace, how it began. Dan, I'll start with you. Can you tell us?
Well, it's interesting. I was just thinking it was about 7 years ago. I kind of came up with an idea at home, talking with my sons about ways to involve people that they were showing me on YouTube and on social media. They were making videos and films that I thought were just great quality. I thought, how can we get some of these people to make things for NASA or about NASA? And we kind of kicked around some ideas. And because I knew Carlos had so much expertise in this area, I quickly saw him out and said, well, what do you think of this idea? And we both worked on it some more and kind of fleshed it out some, but realized that we had no idea how to do a film competition or film festival. And so I sought out Houston Cinema Arts Society, which is the best known and best respected festival in Houston, and just to ask for advice. And at that time, Trish Rigdon was executive director, and we both thought about it, and then it set for about a year. And a year later, I called up Trish and said, I really think we need to do this together. And she said, I was just getting ready to call you and say the same thing. And from there, we started working to put the plan together, and then 5 years ago had the first festival, and this is the 5th anniversary now. Carlos has been involved from the beginning as well. Carlos, you have memories you want to add?
Well, I guess you described it well, and I guess our conversations at the beginning were about the archives and the wealth of imagery that are not only at the Johnson Space Center, but at other NASA centers. And at that time, the challenge was how to access all those archives, because the imagery was spread throughout many centers. And we were starting to work at that time on what today is images.nasa.gov, which is a central archival place of the best imagery that the agency has to offer to the public. And lots of our friends, Cinespace friends and filmmakers, draw their footage from that website, images.nasa.gov, as well as other websites. So it was a perfect fit back then, and we continued working on this new website, and today it's up and running, and it's quite an asset for NASA, for filmmakers, for news media. And so you could say that Cinespace helped give some energy to this website that we're very proud of.
Wow. Well,
I'll just add one point, Richard. One of our early objectives, one of our still current objectives, has been not only to try to involve all this new blood for NASA and trying to tell NASA's story or tell their own story with NASA imagery, but also to help get people or to help us plumb or mine this huge archive we've got of images, a lot of which haven't been seen for decades. You know, we don't even know what all is out there. NASA has been producing imagery for 60 years in all of its programs, both you know, Earth sciences as well as missions to the moon and all of our astronauts and space station and shuttle, but all of our astronomical work too. And there's stuff that, you know, nobody currently working at NASA has ever seen. There's no way that we'll ever be able to go through that. So the idea of having the public go through and find the good stuff and find the stuff that inspires them was also one of the objectives of Cinespace.
So I could add that from the perspective of the Houston Cinema Arts Festival, which I was the artistic director for 10 years, we were particularly interested, obviously, in partnering with our neighbor NASA in Houston, but also really the artistic quality of what we could help bring to the project. And what was particularly interesting to me at the time, and to Patrick, who was another Kwiatkowski who was involved in this, was collage filmmaking, the possibility of filmmakers who were taking found footage, appropriating footage that was out there and remixing it in a way to create new works. And so that really was some of the genesis of the concept of having people take footage from the archive, but add to it, you know, where ultimately I think we said at least 10% of the footage needs to be from the NASA archive, but you could expand on that. You want to add to that, Dan?
Yeah, that you bring up a really interesting point that we learned early on, because we were doing this jointly. But you know, our original thoughts was, you know, coming at it from a space agency point of view, was we were looking for stuff that was technically correct and told NASA's story and all that. You were looking at things more from an artistic point of view. So as we had to go through and judge all these submissions and select the finalists and work together for the first year or two, it was really interesting learning how to look at them together, and you get us appreciating your point of view
and us appreciating yours. Those
Yeah.
early jury meetings are unforgettable, and I think we all really learned a lot, and it was fascinating. That, I mean, I was always happy, and I guess I guess I was involved in 3 or 4 of them. Just the quality of what we found. I mean, the quality is one thing, but also the international range. How many different countries were represented just this last year in submissions?
I think it was over 50, wasn't it, Carlos?
Right at 50. And every year we're very pleased with the international aspect. You know, lots of participants from Europe, Latin America, Asia. It's amazing. And finalists, winners are international. We have had folks come from many countries to receive their prizes, or to the premiere to see their films, you know, premiered for the first time, from many countries, from especially Europe, Scandinavia, have been here at our festivals.
Yeah, and I'll acknowledge that early on. Sorry, I just want to acknowledge early on that I wasn't sure that really year after year, could we get quality stuff that every year? Should we make this a biennial event? And the quality has, and the variety has continued to sustain itself year after year. Do you feel that way now?
Yeah. I would almost say, Richard, that the quality has improved from the first season as compared to this last season. And most films now could almost be judged for technical quality. So very pleased with not only the technical quality, but the content, the storytelling, really good works.
Dan, I interrupted you. Did you want to say something else about that?
No, that's good.
Okay, good. So let's jump to this year and what was special about this particular year. What stood out for you in the crop of films that folks here just saw? Any anecdotes you could share?
Well, I think Carlos and I both have a different point. I'll mention mine first. Every year, in addition to having overall winners, in the finalists. We also have a couple special categories that NASA picks, and we change them every year. This year, for the first time, one of the special categories was the documentaries. And therefore, we had more documentaries than we usually do, and two documentaries won the top two awards. And it was really interesting seeing those documentaries and seeing people tell stories about NASA's history that we had never heard. And they were able to find footage about it and to tell us. And in fact, at least one of them we plan to follow up with and invite the filmmakers down to JSC, to Johnson Space Center, and tell more about their story, because we think it's a great one for NASA employees to hear, and none of us were aware of it.
Uh-huh.
Carlos?
Yeah, and just to, as part of the special categories, we decided to have a category that showed the best film using the most unusual or obscure imagery from NASA, because there is typical NASA footage that is used many festivals, often like the Kennedy speech. But this time, filmmakers went deep into our archives, and the film that best depicted those obscure images was a film of the old shuttle era and the young engineers, and they used VHS footage. They used footage of the fresh out engineers doing work, testing work on the shuttle. And that was very refreshing to see that type of footage used for this festival. And then, as Dan mentioned, this year, for the very first time, one film won in two categories: the overall category, first place, and then the best documentary. And it's a wonderful film. It is a great cinematography. You just saw it. It's The Most Ideal Place.
Uh-huh.
And one thing that I learned, and I know that Dan learned that too, and I guess most of you in the audience may have learned today, is that it was not at NASA Johnson Space Center Mission Control that we heard one small step and one giant leap for humankind. Was first heard in Spain, not in Houston. It may have been 1 or 2 milliseconds before, but it was first heard in Spain. So it's a wonderful story. And you know, what a lesson we learned through Cinespace.
By the way, was was Rick Linklater the judge again this year, or did you find somebody else? No, it was Rick again.
Rick
Linklater.
For 5 years, and we hope he stays judge. You know, he's told us how much he really enjoys participating in Cinespace. And the way it works is we and HCAST jointly together will pick the finalists. And then from the finalists, Richard will go through and pick the 3 top winners. And so that's been his involvement every year, and I hope he continues to do it.
Right. Rick, or Richard Linklater, is on the advisory board of the Houston Cinema Arts Festival and grew up in Houston, and has really enjoyed this. He's, at one point we asked him, are you sure you want to, he insists. He looks forward to the judging process every year, I remember. So any other stories about any of the other award winners you might want to mention, the films that were standouts from this year?
Again, one of the, as Carlos mentioned, one of the things that always strikes us is, you know, we just put out the call for people to make movies that they're inspired to make, and we get movies of all types. We don't have any requirements on genre or style or anything. We get everything. Mm-hmm. But so many of the movies are about how people are inspired by NASA, by what we've done, our history, by this imagery. And when you work there every day, sometimes you forget about the impact that we have on people's everyday lives, and not just historically, but continuing. You know, there a lot of people, their whole concept of their place in the universe and their idea of being explorers and the encouragement for doing things in their lives, a lot of it comes, for some people, comes from space exploration and from what we've done. And so it's been very inspiring to us to see these sometimes even love letters kind of movies that people make about what we've done and about the things that have happened through NASA and that they send in to us to see. So that's always been, one of the huge benefits to me.
Yeah.
I'd like to just wrap up. Tell us, because I understand that Cinespace is taking off in some new directions. Can you tell us what's ahead?
I'll mention a couple things and then Carlos can jump in too. So we're reaching out to science museums around the country to put together packages of Cinespace finalists from each year that they can start using in their programming in their theaters to show audiences, attached with some messages from NASA about current missions and about some of the things going on there. But using Cinespace as a way to make connection and to provide them more programming. Hopefully that continues to expand and we get into more and more museums around the country. We're trying to start some educational programs with both HCAS and with us directly about tying it to STEM. And also, even during this coronavirus period, home tutorial videos for art teachers to use on how to make films and how to do the research so that they can submit things to Cinespace. And so we're trying to reach out to more and more audiences, and it's turned out that at least so far, I think it's going to be real successful. Carlos, do you want to have other ideas you want to add?
Well, what comes to mind is our program in Latin America, and especially in Mexico. Every year, we have, not the first year, but the last 4 years, we have offered the film, the finalists, to a very enthusiastic Mexican or a fellow from Yucatan who has helped show the films in Merida, in Yucatan, with subtitles. And then we established a connection with what is equivalent to the NASA archives, but for the Mexican cinema. Mexican cinema is very rich, and their archives are housed in a place called Cineteca Nacional, which is a movie house with about 12 theaters. And it's more experimental movies, classical movies, artistic movies. And they have welcomed Cinespace for the last 3 years. And it's shown now featured in their theater. And then they have a program that goes around the country where Cinespace is shown all over Mexico. And we continue with that program. We just finished the reel so that we can start showing it now in the next few months down in Mexico City and the Mexican Republic. So very, very excited about this program, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to go further into Latin America and other places in the world.
Well, I want to thank you both. I want to let people know that I believe the full archive of the previous 4 editions of Cinespace are available online for people to check out at the Cinespace. Do you know the URL?
Cinespace,
yes.
Cinespace.org.
Cinespace.org. I'm very excited about what you're saying, that these you're connecting with science centers, and that Science Works in Ashland may be one of them in the coming years. I'm grateful to you both because Dan and Carlos before him have been coming to Ashland to present Cinespace, and while they're participating in our AIFF Learn program and visiting local schools, and the local high school planetarium in Medford is really missing you guys this year. So
well, I got to say, I'm really disappointed not to be able to come out this year. It's been a highlight. And before we end, we ought to point out that the competition for 2020 is open. The deadline for submissions is June 15th. So if any people watching this or feel inspired to go make a short film of their own, they have plenty of time to make one and submit it to us for this year's competition.
Right. Dan, Carlos, thank you so much for participating in the virtual Ashland Independent Film Festival, and hope to see you in Ashland next year.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Bye-bye.